What's up, guys? Garrett here at PAX West 2017 for COGconnected, checking out a little game called Planet of the Apes: The Last Frontier. I'm here with founder of Imaginati Studios, Martin Alltimes. Martin, tell me a little bit about yourself and how the game came about.
Yeah, so I've been in the video business about 25 years, and I basically decided to set up my own company. And when I decided to become an independent developer, I asked myself, well, what sort of video game do I want to make? And I'd realized, that it was possible to create video games today using off-the-shelf technology and self-publish them. So I thought I can take experiments and do things that within innovative mechanics in them that wouldn't be possible inside a large corporation. When I thought about the games of the last generation, what was my favorite? What was the game I was most inspired by? What was the game I really liked to take forward, or try and find a way to improve it? It was Heavy Rain. That was my favorite game, and I happened to be talking to a friend of mine who was an agent at the time at GDC, and when we were talking about what I was going to do and setting up this studio, I said, well, what I really want to do is create games that are about interactive storytelling. I think with this generation of console, you can create absolutely realistic, lifelike performances. And using technology that's off the shelf like Unreal can deliver kind of AAA quality graphics that will be out of the reach of a normal independent developer until quite recently. And he said, well, that's really amazing, because actually I've just been asked by Andy Serkis to find someone to get him involved in video games in some way. I basically decided to fly over to the UK to see him, and I pitched this idea of them taking their money that was meant to be making movies for Andy and using it to make a video game. And they were kind of a little bit nervous about this, because actually what they were really interested in is Andy has a performance capture studio, a stage where you actually capture digital characters, and that's their main interest in video games at the time. But I'd convinced them, that basically we could do something really amazing and groundbreaking in performance capture, and achieve this kind of results that you only get in AAA games using a kind of indie budget, and that's how we started down this journey. And then what happened was, Andy was working on Dawn at the time. He'd actually just finished, in fact, and he knew that the reviews and previews were kind of off the chart, and it was going to be a success, and we're going to greenlight the third movie. And so when we started to look at it and say, okay, well, this could be pretty interesting, there's a direct connection with Andy on the film. But what's really interesting about it is, if you look at the franchise, it's very, very smart, it's very mature, it's very intelligent and sophisticated for a Hollywood blockbuster. There are no black and white characters in it, and there is moral ambiguity. If you look at a character like Cobra, who technically is a villain in it, the reason why Cobra does what he does is completely legitimate. You understand it because he was abused by humans when he grew up, so he doesn't trust them, and that explains why he does what he does. Equally, the humans, 90% of civilization has been wiped out. They're living on the edge. They're kind of fearful and nervous about what's going to happen to them. So anything that's a potential threat to their survival, they're going to react against defensively. And that explains why they behave in the way they do. But what's also really cool about it is that Caesar in Planet of the Apes isn't your classic action hero, right? He's actually trying to find a way to avoid conflict. And what that gave us was the basis for something really quite interesting, because what you want in interactive drama, interactive fiction, is moral ambiguity, where there are no black and white choices. But also what you want is the ability to have different endings that feel meaningful. So if you think about it, what Dawn gave us was a basis for creating a narrative where apes could win, humans could win, or you could find a way to live together. And that was really exciting. So we realized this is a really interesting franchise, and that was the springboard for creating the story behind Planet of the Apes: Last Frontier.
It sounds fantastic, and I mentioned earlier I'm actually a huge fan of the trilogy. Just saw War recently, I loved it. One of my favorite trilogies of all time, easily. And like you mentioned, these characters have very deep morals, and they're very complicated characters. Like you said, there's no black and white, and that's one of my favorite aspects of the film, is how dramatic it can be, especially the apes and the humans, the dynamic between the two. And could they live together? Maybe it's impossible, we don't know. And there's a very particular spirit that pertains to the films. And I was going to ask, how do you guys, or how are you bringing the spirit to the game?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is, yeah, absolutely, we bring that moral ambiguity. And the way in which we engineer that is, we knew if we put you in charge of just the apes and then presented you with dilemmas that involved humans, it would be very easy for the player just to basically say, well, it's called Planet of the Apes, you know, who cares if the humans live or die? Hey, let's win. Let's let the apes win. But by putting you in charge of both apes and human characters, you are able to empathize and understand the plight of both sides. So in the fiction of this story, which takes place in between dawn and war, the idea is that both of these, the ape tribe and the human survivors, are trying just to get by, and there are events that conspire to bring them into conflict with each other, and there are forces within both sides of them that are engineering, you know, a war. And it's how you deal with that that determines whether the apes survive, the humans survive, whether you find peace, or actually you're all annihilated. And so there are very, very dramatic differences in terms of the outcomes. But like you say, we didn't want to just make the apes the heroes. It would have been too simple, it would have been too easy, and there would have been no drama in it.
What was the writing process like in that? Like, how did you develop these brand new characters to fit into this world?
Well, there was a couple of things. Fox and ourselves, we agreed that we didn't want to make a movie tie-in. And there's two reasons for that. A, yes, we wanted the creative freedom to be able to do what we tell a story that we wanted to tell and make it as dramatic as we could possibly do. And in order to do that, we have to be able to kill off all the characters. I mean, literally every single character in this game can live or die. So that was important for us. And the second thing we wanted to do is, you know, we didn't want people to come in with preconceptions based on they knew the characters and therefore they knew what they would do and wouldn't do. So that also enabled us to basically have the freedom to create something that was much more dramatic and give the player real dilemmas where they wouldn't know what the characters in the game were going to do. And so our apes have splintered off from Caesar's tribe after the events of Dawn, and they've been involved in skirmishes with the humans, but they've migrated 800 miles northeast into the Rocky Mountains. They found a cave network there where they think they can live in peace, but you know, events conspire against them. And in terms of the writing process that you mentioned, you know, unlike most of the video games that I've been involved, normally you spend, you know, let's say you're working on a game for 5 years, half of that time will be spent waiting for the technology to turn up. So usually the writers aren't even contacted until that, like 2.5 years, 3 years in. They're usually the last people hired. But because our games are all about storytelling, that's the focus, and it's all about the choices, they were the first people we hired. We had writers on the project way before we had anyone from a development background. And because it's critical to how the story plays out. And there's no point in having an army of engineers and artists unless you know what your characters are, know what your story is, know what the choices are, because it's completely pointless. So it's a very, very different process to most of the video games. In fact, all the games I've ever worked on. And it's more, I imagine it's kind of a hybrid of making a video game and making a movie.
There are many fantastic choice-based games that exist currently on the market, whether it be Telltale, like you mentioned, Heavy Rain was one of your favorite games. How does The Last Frontier change things up from traditional choice-based games?
Yeah, and I think that's a really great question. So for me, you know, whenever you start on a new project, I think you have to start, even if you're a fan of the genre, even if you're a fan of the developers, you have to start from a base where you have to challenge the fundamentals of why you're making those design choices. And there are a couple of big things that I thought were kind of interesting opportunities for us. The first one is, you know, direct control of the character. So for some people, this is like, it's one of the 10 commandments of console games. Thou must be allowed to control the character at all times. But when I asked myself why you are controlling a character in a choice-based game, it didn't always make sense. I think Heavy Rain and Until Dawn and Life is Strange justify it because there's a detective element in it. There's a mystery to be unraveled, right? So you're going around, you're collecting clues, you're interviewing people to discover what's really going on. But a lot of what actually happens, if you think about it, when you're playing those games, it's kind of pointless in the terms of navigation. We've all been in that sequence in a whether it's a choice-based adventure or an action adventure where you're in a village and there's 4 people you've got to talk to, and you've got to wander all the way around the village to find the right person in order to move the plot forward. And if you think about it, you know, what value does that, is that really interesting behavior? Sometimes I just describe it to people, sometimes I feel like I'm a janitor in video games, when I'm walking around opening, closing doors, picking up objects, and that I don't think that is interesting for the player. And so we made that decision to remove navigation, but when we did it, we asked ourselves, okay, we know what we lose, but what do we gain? And the key things that we gained were this: the pace at which the game happens is really, really rapid. You know, in a choice-based game, I mean, the mechanic is the choices, those are the things that make the difference to how the story ends, what players do and don't do. So it really concentrates the gameplay and improves the speed of the game. We have probably as many choices in this game as you have in an 8 to 10 hour experience, but it actually takes 2 to 3 hours to play through. It's probably 2.5, 3 hours. It might be a bit longer than that now, but that's broadly speaking, that's where it is. So it can be played in one sitting. So you can go home and just like playing your favorite movie, you can actually play this experience and get a complete story from beginning to end. But then, unlike a normal movie, you can go back in 2 to 3 weeks' time, play it again, and get a completely different ending. And as I said, there are at least 3 major endings, but actually there are at least 8 other permutations on that, depending who lives or dies. So it can be very, very dramatic, and you can get endings where all the really nice people live, and you get an ending where everybody dies, right? All the good people die. And so when you're playing it, it really does feel very, very different. And the other thing that we realised that we gained is like, so now, okay, I'm not directly controlling that character, so more than one person can actually vote on that choice. And that's how it led us to On the Couch multiplayer. So we realised that you could actually have... the game's actually 1 to 4 players. It could have been more than that. There's some technical reasons why we kept it 4. But on PlayStation, what happened was we had a presentation from Sony at the beginning of the year about their plans to enable people to download apps and use those apps to control the game. And then we thought, wow, this is so cool, because in the past, when people have developed the kind of peripherals for games, you get a piece of kit, and if the Sony or Microsoft, whoever suddenly decides to stop making games for that, you're stuck with this piece of kit, and it's expensive, whereas everyone walks around with a mobile phone. So anyone who comes to your house can spend a couple of minutes, can download the app, and they can be playing this game with their mobile phone. And the reason why that's really important to me personally is, Heavy Rain was the only game that my partner actually sat down and watched me play. Normally, I'd be working on games or playing games. She'd come into the room and look at it and go, that's nice, and walk out. But with Heavy Rain, she actually sat down and watched me play it. And I realised if I could figure out a way to make this interface really, really simple, then people who wouldn't normally be able to play console games can suddenly enjoy these incredibly interactive experiences. And that's what this enables, really.
Yeah, as a fan, I'm very excited. One, because as I mentioned, I love the movies, and in a lot of ways, this game is the 4th movie in the series in a way, but one that you have direct control over. So that's why I'm very excited to dive in, and I can't wait to find out more, and we can expect it this fall, correct?
It's coming out this fall, and it's download only, and we'll announce the price point shortly, but it will not be a full-price game.
Awesome. To PS4, Xbox One, and PC, correct?
PS4, Xbox, and PC.
Awesome. Well, Martin, I can't thank you enough for your time, and I can't wait to see more from the game.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, for more on Planet of the Apes, The Last Frontier, and all things PAX West 2017, keep it locked on COGconnected.